Hello and welcome to this month's Homeschool Helps and Hacks. We are going to be talking all about some flexible organization solutions. So whether you naturally really love organization or if that's an area you struggle with, we will hopefully be able to help you with some solutions and tools and really teach you more and explain more about how Sonlight makes that easy for you. I am Sunny. I'm Sonlight's community manager. I'm also a Sonlight mom of two children in 4th and 9th grades, and we've used Sonlight since preschool. Joining me too are two of our Sonlight mentors, Jonna and Jen. Jonna, it looks like you're on the top, so we'll start with you. Why don't you tell us a little bit more about yourself and what you're doing here for us?
Hi, Sunny. I am Jonna Lawrence. I work with Sonlight in their marketing and product development. I am also a veteran Sonlight homeschool mom of 4. And I like to say I am an organized chaos handler. So
You will be perfect for this. And Jen, why don't you tell us a little bit more about yourself?
Hi, I'm Jen. I am also a veteran homeschool mom. I used Sonlight from the very beginning with all 4 of my kids. I have worked as a professional organizer, but don't let that, don't let that change your view of me. I am actually really chill in my homeschool style. And so I, kind of did it the opposite of Sunny.
Yeah, so if you've watched any of our other videos, you know I'm very much a type A perfectionist, and that was one of the things that drew me to Sonlight, was that it was so well planned out and thought out, because I did not want to have to figure that out myself. But as we'll talk through this today, you'll learn that it's also just structured enough, but also flexible enough that if you are not somebody who wants to check every box or finds it challenging to check every box, maybe you want to, but you find it difficult to do that, we have solutions for you that we'll be discussing today. So thank you, ladies, so much for joining me. Let's talk about that instructor's guide, right? That is designed to keep you organized, but it's a lot of paper. So what do you do? Or, even if you're using the online version, which is new this year, it's a lot of information. So what do you do when you are more that creative, laid back, not super organized type of personality? What do you do with all that information coming at you?
I like to pull my schedule, like what I was working on, out into a different binder. I didn't want to look at the whole binder because it's a lot of paperwork. You're right. And I could just focus on what I was working on. So if it was the literature book, thankfully the schedules are in the back. And if I got ahead or behind, I had that schedule to work off of in my book or in my personal working binder. Sonlight now has their new planner, which is a fabulous way to do Sonlight stuff in a planner. But I use just a 3-ring binder of my own that I like to keep my schedule in, just to keep us going.
Yeah, I did the same, Jonna, and I actually brought mine with me. You can see it, but it's this big instead of, I think this is a 1-inch binder, instead of that massive 4-inch binder. And I just used divider tabs in it. I always had more than one kid going at a time, and so all doing different things. Yeah, that's the big guy.
Yeah.
And so I would pull out 4 or 6 weeks for each kid behind each divider and just use the guide from there. The other thing I always remind people is that it is a guide. It is not the instructor. Just because the IG says to do something does not mean it has to be done. If your kids are going to Sunday school and Bible study and Awana, you don't necessarily have to do all of that, like the book that goes along with the Bible. If they're getting plenty of that somewhere else, if your kids have a math tutor and are doing math somewhere else, don't even think about putting that in your IG. If the instructor's guide says, oh, we're going to do a thing, and you're like, we just did that, don't do it. The homeschool police do not come if you skip something in the IG.
The other way to look at that too is that it's the IG is your skeleton of your year. It's going to keep you on track. It's going to keep you on that kind of like the railroad tracks, but you can stop and get off and expand it and come back on and not lose the quantity and the quality that you get with Sonlight. And if you are the type that has to do every book and everything, just expect that maybe your year is not going to be exactly 180 days. So maybe you don't do everything in a day. You just are going to stretch your year out. You're still doing the work, but you can do it at the pace that your kids need to be. It does not have to be, day 45, all has to be done on the 45th day. You could stretch it to the 46th if needed, because you're still going to get to all of it.
That is true. One of the things that I love about the instructor's guide is there are so many resources in it. There are vocabulary words and maps for every book, and questions for every chapter. But like, if it's a book I've read and I'm familiar with that book, I may just ask my child, "Hey, what part are you up to? Oh, what do you think of that girl? Or have you gotten to the exciting thing that happened yet?" And if they know, I don't ever look at the questions. If we can have an intelligent conversation about it, where they're proving to me that they read and are understanding and are engaged, I don't need the questions. For some books that I've never read, looking at you, Hobbit, I am like question by question by question by question. Are you getting this? Because like, I'm not getting this. I don't really Hobbit, but like, I'll use all the questions for that. So use it as you need it.
I'm with you, Jen. I'm not a fan of like fantasy. That's just not my genre. And probably because I'm kind of an uptight person. I like things that are realistic. I don't have much imagination. So if I have to picture other worlds, that's not something I do well. But I love what you said about the different kids, because I really learned my first child, it was easy to teach exactly day one, ask all the questions, do all the things. She was that kid that would just sit next to me and listen to anything I said. Then my son came along 5 years later, totally different personality, a lot more creative on his own, more imaginative, and a wiggly kid. He was not going to sit right next to me. No. And it's funny because we learned with him, oh, wait, I can't teach this all in order. That's not going to work for him. If he gets really into a book, he wants to keep going. And so that's the first time that I really learned to start using the schedule more horizontally, where we might start, history, and it might be broken into 3 separate readings over the week. That's not going to work, because once he's in it, well, let's get it done and keep going. And so that was the first time that I really learned to kind of flex the schedule or use it more like a checklist, change things. So that's something that, whether you are more flexible or your kids are more flexible that way, not feeling like you have to accomplish all of day 45 in one day is, I think, a very valid point. Even if you do like to do all the things, I love what one of you said about it being a guide. You get to decide what order do you do that in.
Right.
And Jen, I think you mentioned that there's so many resources in the IG, but that doesn't mean you have to use everything there. You don't have to read every note. Now that I am very familiar with Sonlight, I almost never read those intro pages anymore. I don't even look at the stuff in Appendix 3 until I need it throughout the year, all of that stuff. So once you're kind of familiar with how the IG is laid out, I think it's then very easy to flex it beyond that. You guys mentioned working binders. Let's talk a little bit more about that working binder or file folder method I've heard some people use. This is something I only recently started doing as my kids got a little bit older and they were both in separate programs and doing a little more independent work. Prior to that, I just kept the big binders out. But what does that mean to somebody who has no idea? You mentioned a smaller binder, but what does that look like? What are some different options for making your own working binder or file method?
So I literally went into the big binder and undid the whole bindy part and pulled out weeks 1 through 6 with those 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 tabs, all the paper that was in there, and put it in a smaller binder and closed the rings. And that's it's as simple as that. And then I'm not dealing with that monster, and I'm not dealing with that overwhelming amount of paper that to me looks like a giant to-do list. I can't handle that. But now I have a 1-inch binder that's not even full. I usually keep my book list in it so I know what books are coming. And then I can check things off in there. And when we are done with all those 6 weeks, I open the big binder again, slip these in, take the next ones out, switch it over, and go. So every 6 weeks, we're exactly on track, because I can't switch it over until I've finished week 6 in every subject. But then, so we might have a catch-up day at the end where we're like, just do these last couple of things so we can switch the paper. But we're never on the same day in every subject, because that's how we roll. Sunny, just breathe. And so anything that I need in that working binder, whether it's science worksheets or, whatever else, I just keep them in there. And then I can pick up my 1-inch binder and we can go to soccer practice. We can go to the doctor's office. We can take a sibling somewhere and read in the car, whatever.
I was going to, you talked about the file folder, and I did not do this all my years, but for several years, I had a rolling cart that held 36 hanging file folders, and I had 4 children. So here comes in color coding, and I feel like I am one of the more flexible, whatever you want to do, let's do it type of moms. But each one of my kids had a color, and their file folder was inside like week 1, whatever activity sheet for science, language arts, or if they had math worksheets, were in that folder. And so they knew those were their responsibility on that week. And when they were done, they stuck it right back in there so I could grade it when they were done. But I kept a working binder like you talked about, Jen. That was my notes. They had their activity sheets. So if I had a child that wanted to work ahead in math, they had all their stuff at their fingertips, basically. So, and they knew, one child was green. She knew she'd go to all the green folders. If there was nothing in there, she didn't have to do anything that week. So, yeah,
Yep.
But that's putting color coding in. But we rarely stayed on, if we were all in week 5, that might be true for our HBL, but we might be in week 4 for our language arts. And I might have a kid on week 7 for math. Who knows what they were doing?
Yeah.
So, but we ended every year and they all graduated.
Yep.
I like what you said there, Jen, about, at the end of the 6 weeks, you might catch up because the thought of being on different weeks in different subjects, I know what would happen in my house, and we would move forward in all of our favorite things, and then we would not get the other stuff done. And so for me, it's always been important to, we might finish HBL in 3 days, but we're going to make sure science is done at the end of that week. We're going to make sure language arts, neither of my kids are super excited to write about anything. They would rather listen to the books. And so, language arts, we need to finish that before we move on to the next week in something else, because I just know the kids, and we would not do any of the things that they did not like as well. So I like what you said about that you can still be on different weeks, like what John is saying, but you kind of have that point where it's like, okay, let's catch up, get everything done before we move on to week 7. Or whatever that might be.
And I didn't like to keep more than 3 or 4 weeks at a time in my working binder. And that kind of kept me more accountable to stay in that smaller range than 6 weeks.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's go ahead.
I was going to say, because when you only are looking at that in your binder, you tend to have that I got to get this done before I can go to the next. So
yeah, and that's what we started doing when I started doing the working binder, because like I said, for a long time I didn't, but I have both of my kids just 1 week in the working binder, because my daughter now is in a high school program and she can kind of work at her own pace, but I want to make sure that I'm checking in with her every week so that she's not forgetting books that she read 4 or 5 weeks ago, something like that. And so I just do 1 week, and I've got a folder between both kids, and there's a pocket in there. That's where I put science and language arts worksheets. But then the scheduling and all of that, it's just that 1 week. So kind of play around with, I love what you said about the file folders. I've never done that where the kids are responsible for coming, like they have to come to me and get their worksheets. But if you've got kids that are a little bit older, maybe a little bit more independent, for them to just go find their file and start working on it. I love that idea. That's something that I think myself as a child would have enjoyed, because then I could have done my own thing and been on my own pace. So that's a great idea. Jonna, you touched on it earlier about the new Sonlight planner. A lot of our parents end up using either like a parent planner or a student planner or both. Jen, I know you've used planners in the past too. What are some ideas for people to use there, whether it be to help their kids be more independent or to keep themselves on track, keep track of their record keeping, all of those different things?
So one of the first things I would maybe change the mentality, because we have our guide, it tells you what to do, and you can check that off and put in pencil who's done what. But use your planner, like the Sonlight planner, to record what your child's done. And instead of checking on the guide, you can record where they are. Make it a record keeping system versus a planning system. I found that to be an excellent tool for me when at the end of our homeschooling years, when I realized I didn't have to plan out the whole years because I already had it planned in the guide, but I could record what we did because I lived in a couple of different states at the end there. So some required by hours, some just, are you schooling?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I used a couple of different systems depending on the age and independence of my children and what state we lived in and what we had to report. And so the years that I lived in a reporting state, I kept an attendance sheet in the front of my working binder to record all the days that my children showed up at my house. And but a lot of years I kept just a 5x7 from any grocery store, spiral bound little planner, like week at a glance kind of planner for the kids who requested one, because then they could do I started out having to write like math, 3D, 3E, 3F, and, give them specifics. And by the end, I could just say, make sure you're keeping track, make sure you know what the next thing is to do. And they've used, I have a couple of kids who as adults are planner people and a couple who are like, what? So, they turn out differently, even if you try to raise them exactly the same. But just as a matter of independence, where like I had a plan, but they wanted to be able to go to their planner and open it up and be like, I know what I'm doing. I got you, Mom. So, and as soon as a kid is ready to do that, I like to let them.
I had a year or two probably where we did a laminated, their schedule of what they should do in a day.
Mm-hmm.
You don't always get it done, but they could check off. And it was their only, like they had a clipboard that they just marked off that they did. And I had to come and approve that they were done. Because sometimes they like to check off saying they did their math. Maybe not.
My children would never do that, John.
Well, mine would start it and then call it done. They may not finish.
Yes. Yeah.
Well, and that's something I started doing this year is putting my IG pages in the page protectors, the clear ones, and using a wet erase marker. That way the kids can mark off what they've done, but it's not actually written on my IG pages because that's my record. So my plan, we're only in our first week, so we'll see how it goes. But my plan is then at the end of the week, I can pull that out and mark up anything that I want to mark. But the kids are able to just look directly at the schedule, mark through what they've done with a wet erase marker that I can then wash off and then put a new page in there. And it's going to keep those IG pages clean enough, but then also allow them that freedom to look at the schedule, see what they want to do. I love what you said about as soon as they're able to use a planner or look at that page, let them do it. I only have 2 kids and I find that super helpful, but I'm sure for families with more kids, like you guys have 4 each, to be able to keep everybody scheduled, I'm sure that helps a lot to have those older kids being a little more independent than you having to run the whole schedule for everybody.
And it's a life skill for them. You aren't just teaching them to help you out and doing school. You're teaching them to be an adult. So yes, add that on to what you're teaching.
We included sometimes things in those planners like, doing their laundry, or whatever other chores they had so that they could be more independent about that also. Because, like Jonna said, it's a life skill. You're teaching them to be independent. And if you want them to be independent in high school, you can't start letting them plan their own day in high school. You start at the beginning, and when they're in whatever 2nd or 3rd grade saying, okay, you do your Wordly Wise, I'm going to go unload the dishwasher and come back. And, you sit here and work, even though I'm not standing over you. And your mileage may vary depending on each child because mine were not all the same.
No, and planners today, what's the big draw on planners is that they have all the extra things kind of planned for you in them. Like you were saying, laundry and dishes and whatnot. So you could say Tuesday is your laundry day and Wednesday is you're going to change sheets in your bed day and you rotate your kids to do that. Yep. That's independence and, flexing your workload onto them. So
yeah, absolutely. I love that you guys are mentioning that too, because I think homeschooled kids in a lot of ways, they are more prepared for those daily life things just because they've been around you all day. Just like they learn to speak with adults because they're around an adult, they also are able to kind of catch those skills because they're with you, they're at home, as opposed to, growing up, moving out and realizing they haven't been home during the day when cleaning's happening or meals are being prepared or things like that. So yeah, I love the idea of putting that into their planner so that they can totally schedule themselves. Let's talk about flexing the schedule without breaking it. This comes from a question that we received where somebody said she was doing the 36 weeks, 4-day program, doesn't want to cut out books, wants to have some flexibility, but also does not want to fall behind, as in not, we always talk about there's no such thing as behind, but in her case, she's just not getting the work done, I think is what's happening. And, she's saying, here we are, we're trying to get through our year, we're not getting it done. So what are some ideas to flex that schedule without breaking it? Probably number one, let's start with 5-day versus 4 days. What should you do if you're struggling to get things done, but you still want to squeeze in those books?
One of the things that my oldest taught me to do was she was very frustrated in those early Sonlight years by the read 1-page assignments. She was like, listen, I walked all the way across the room to pick this book up for you off that shelf. And then I sat down, you're going to read me 1 page? I think not. And so I, to satisfy her, we would read the week in that book, but then not necessarily read every book that day. So we sort of block scheduled her Sonlight because she liked to read longer than some of those early assignments were. Well, I found out later that strategy works for a lot of things. So if the problem of not getting it all done, if any part of that problem is switching gears, like lets the chaos begin, then I would, read more in one book, to their attention tolerance, and then do a whole nother chunk of something else the next day. And if you can work in fewer books a day, but larger chunks, there's less transition time between things. And sometimes that keeps the chaos. Again, they're all those kids are different. I have no idea, but that was what I went to, was like, we're not switching gears. Even if this is an all science day, we're going to get, this much % of the week done if I have to tie you people to your chairs. So
I was going to say there's 5 or 6 books usually on an HBL. Once you pass Bible, that is your history, your read aloud, and a reader. And to say on Monday, I'm going to read all of the history today. And we're going to do all our map points and all of our timeline. Tomorrow, we're going to do all of our read aloud for the week. And I would go over lunchtime, So pause, get lunch made, finish reading for the day. That's how we did, because it was easier to do a chunk and then go to the next. So.
And while they're eating, they're a captive audience.
Yes.
I used breakfast for Bible, and then lunch was my read aloud. Yes.
Yeah.
Well, and I love, meals. If you've got that toddler that likes to interrupt, oftentimes meals are good. Maybe it's not the child you're teaching that needs to be read to during a mealtime, but it keeps the toddler from coming in and screaming or making loud noises when you're trying to teach the older child. Love mealtime. And then kind of that loop block checklist style, that's something that works really well for my younger child, because he just, what you said about shifting gears, Jen, if you read a couple of pages and he's finally focusing and then you switch to another book, then he has to start over again. It's like a whole new process. And so that works great for kids that maybe, they can change gears really fast, or maybe they get bored reading the same book for a longer period of time. But I always watch my kids when I'm reading to them and say, okay, are they still engaged in this? Are they still enjoying this? If so, let's sneak in an extra chapter. Let's read tomorrow's reading and the next day's. And my approach especially with my younger child, as we saw that that's the way he liked to learn, is to get a stack of all the books. And I grab the whole week's worth of books on Monday, put them on the table, and I say, okay, pick your top 4 books here. What order are we going to go in? And that's what we're going to do first. And so we're going to try to read, if we've got 2 or 3 days worth out of that history book, we're going to read it all on Monday. And then, okay, we're going to do your poetry book. Poetry is always the fun one because they're short and easy to do. You can do that very quickly. And then, you want to read, out of whatever Bible study book it is, maybe 2 or 3 days worth. So we're going to do that. And then we save the other subjects for the next day. So now, Tuesday, we didn't do any science yesterday, but now we're going to do 2 or 3 days worth of science. And so that's kind of the way I do it. Like you guys said, John, I love that you pointed out the HBL is really only probably 5-ish books. And so, if you do 1 book a day, that's the same as reading 20 pages in each book every day.
Right. And science normally, especially the lower levels, you're talking maybe 2 or 3 pages a day on a topic for the week. So it's very easy to sit down and read all of the science for the week. And it really takes you about 15-20 minutes. And then do your science questions. And then you can let Dad do the experiment on Saturday. So.
Or let him do 3 experiments once every few weeks. That's what my husband does. So it is funny because that actually is kind of our personalities at work there, right? I would probably do an experiment every week, like it's assigned. But we have Science Dad who does all the experiments with our son, and he does have a tendency to do 3 or 4 at once, and then he won't do any for a few weeks. But that way, they're already in experiment mode. They've already got all the supplies out, and that's something fun for them to do together. And then I take on the subjects I like, which are the ones involving the reading and things like that. But we do them according to our own personalities too. So yeah, kind of look at what your kids want to do, the way you like to do it. Also, let's talk about the added book option, because there are people who say, I'm doing 5-day because I don't want to miss any books. But 5 days a lot, so they might be better off doing 4 days. So what are, Sonlight has options for you if you want to do 4-day but get all the books. Let's talk a little bit about that for people that aren't aware. What should they do?
So you can order the 4-day schedule and add on your 5-day books to just add in as extra readers during the summer, or when that topic comes up or that time frame for that book, add it in as a evening reading, with the family. That is one option. Back in the day, we often had 5-day schedules and not the option of a 4-day. So we learned to, like we said, double up our days. So we made a 4-day work. So those are 2. Go ahead, Jen.
Because if you double up on history 1 day and science 1 day and read aloud 1 day and Bible 1 day, then you can do the 5 days in 4 days, and it's a little bit extra. So if it's, for somebody who's already feeling like they're falling behind, I probably wouldn't suggest it. But for people who don't want to miss any of those books, doubling up on one subject per day for 4 days gets the job done.
Yep. So you don't have to fear missing out. But Sonlight writes the whole thing so that it covers all us moms, whether you are I need to be 4-day because I go 1 day a week, or I need the 5-day because that's not enough and I still need to do 20 other things. Sonlight's written for you.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know I was telling somebody just the other day that I look at the read alouds as icing on top of the academic subjects. So yes, they're the most fun usually, but I will kind of save those if I do feel like, oh my goodness, we're running out of time. What do we do? I'm not going to get this done. I might move ahead in the history books, Bible, language arts and science, and math, of course, but then I'm going to save a few of those read alouds that I'm going to read in the summer over breaks when we're in the car, any type of thing like that. You can also use an audiobook if you're the one driving in the car, if you spend a lot of time in the car, for some of those read alouds. But those, to me, those are extra. And as soon as I switched my mindset from I have to do all of these to I get to do these, it's something, I don't know, in my brain, it was like, oh, now I can do it. It's easier. So maybe look at that. If you're just looking at all the books saying, oh my gosh, I because there's a lot of read alouds in some of our programs. But remember, that's extra. That's just going to reinforce what the student's learning. So if you miss a few of those, or if you push them into the summer, all that's going to do is help that child remember it better, maybe when they're not as distracted by all the other things they're learning. So some of our favorite read alouds have been done in the summer and not during the regular school year. This is especially easy in the early grades where the read alouds don't even tie into the history anyway. So, you know, you can definitely do that. But even later on, you know, we might skip one during the school year and come back to it later. And then the kids remember that stuff better.
And then
We
they
were
become-
just,
go
go ahead, Donna.
I was gonna say, then if you've skipped and you've left it for summer, they also become part of the reading challenge if we do reading challenges. Or the library challenges or whatever. Those are things keeping their reading skills going during the summer. Even if it's read alouds, it's a comprehension reading skill.
We were just talking on the app about how to get it all in when you're doing multiple programs. And I had to remind one of the parents that, like, for you're thinking, okay, my 13-year-old needs to have all these read alouds done this year, and my 9-year-old needs to have all these read alouds done this year. But remember that in most cases, the 13-year-old is getting all the 9-year-olds read alouds also, and all their history reading and all their science reading, and they're overhearing each other's stuff. So they're actually already getting twice as much as you planned. Now, we all know that one Sonlight program is like 3 times as much reading as any other kid in the world does in a year. So it's okay. Like, that is some place that I feel fine about flexing, is that if I'm reading multiple programs with multiple kids, and this one, you know, the 9-year-old sits in on To Kill a Mockingbird or, you know, whatever, then it's not an emergency that we do every single read aloud as scheduled for every single kid, because they're getting everybody else's read alouds too.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know I've seen some of the advisors would, sit there and just grab everybody's Bible, everybody's history, and just start reading to all the kids, like you said. I know we talk about the read aloud sometimes cover more mature topics and things, but that's why you're reading them aloud. So you can decide, like, oh, do I need to send the 5-year-old out of the room or not? But yeah, a lot of them are still going to be great for multiple ages. And I know my kids have a big age gap, but my older child loves to come back and overhear her brother's read alouds that she had either forgotten some of the details or she knew it was one of her favorites. And so just last night when I was reading his read aloud to him, she was over there laughing and, you know, adding commentary and, oh, I remember this part, and, you know, different things like that. So it is fun, even if they've already heard it, or like you said, doing kind of a group read aloud thing. Now let's talk about the papers, worksheets, school supplies, the other things that can get disorganized very, very quickly, especially if you have lots of kids using them. What are your ideas to corral those things and keep you organized beyond just your scheduling pieces?
Magazine holders is I used for my kids. And again, I color coded. So usually in the fall, they will put them out at Walmart or Target or wherever, color coded magazine holders, and I would put their notebooks in it. And when they were done for the day, they gathered their stuff and they stuck it in that slot just to corral. At the end of the day, they needed to pick everything up and stick it in their color coded bin. Or
we went a different way. My oldest was an artist, and so she had to have the right colored pencils and the right, you know, kind of erasers and and nobody else was allowed to touch. And so we very quickly learned that everybody needed their own pink erasers, because I just wasn't willing to do battle about who touched the eraser every day. And so she had like a soft, like it went in her 3-ring binder. It was like a 3-ring soft-sided pencil case for her school things. And that became cool because she had it, so everybody else wanted one. And so I just, like, they all had a 3-ring binder for their worksheets and their paperwork. And so we just, everybody had a place to keep their pencils and erasers and colored pencils or whatever they needed. And that's where they went. And if yours were gone, that was really a bummer for you.
Well, yeah, and I color code a lot of things for my kids too, because I want to know if something's been left out that should have been put away, I want to know who to get on to for that. Because again, I want them to learn to be responsible for their stuff. And if I see that it's red, I know which kid it is. Or if I see that it's blue, I know which kid it is. So yeah, I mean, even color coding beach towels, bath towels, dishes. I mean, anything you can color code is going to make your life easier, I think, in that regard. So I do love that. And I love that you both talked about like individual school supplies. We tried that early on, and then I was finding school supplies everywhere. So we actually do just one group of school supplies. Now my artsy creative kid does have his own markers and things that he uses for non-school related things, but the school supplies all have to come back to one bucket system that we have. And every year I'm like, okay, where are all the pencils going? I see the pencils are walking away. Why are they leaving? And we're not going to buy a new pack of pencils because I just bought, 50 pencils at the beginning of the year. Where are they? And then the kids have to go and find them, in their rooms, in their beds, wherever they took them to. But we found it was just a little bit easier to keep like crayons from spreading all over the house if we kept one bucket for everybody. But you do kind of have to play around with that and see what's going to work well with your kids for sure.
I was gonna say, we did a lot of the pencils and the markers and stuff were in a carousel in the middle of the dining room table. As much as I desired to have a schoolroom, and I even set up a room as a schoolroom, we ended at the dining room table. So I gave up. But that, those things were there. But like you said, the cups, the notebooks, and those things were all color coded if it was specifically their kid or for the kid.
Yeah, and I love that you mentioned that, because I think a lot of times people think they need a schoolroom that looks like something you'd see online. I know we're the same way. I set up a big desk and the dry erase board and all the bookshelves, and I thought we would be doing school in there, and we don't. We do school in the living room, at the kitchen table, at the counter, outside, wherever we happen to be, in the car, so yeah, having things that are easily portable, like working binders, like a zipping pencil case or something, or even your Sonlight tote bag, putting some supplies in that zipper pocket, whatever it may be. Oftentimes that's where you're actually going to end up doing school. So whatever works for you, whatever process works. You might have a storage room. That's really what our schoolroom is. It's a storage space, but it's not where we do school. Now, what about portfolios, detailed records? I know this is required in some states, but people oftentimes wonder, like, what should I keep at the end of the year if they're not planning to reuse? So say you're talking about your youngest child here, you're not going to be reusing that program. Obviously, if you're going to reuse it, hold on to things. But what really is necessary to hold on to? What are some ideas to keep that organized? Do you need to keep any of it?
Depending on the state that you live in, will change what you have to turn in. Not every state that I've lived in. The states that I've lived in where there was something to turn in at the end of the year, I always got a letter back that said, thank you for turning this in. Your, responsibility for this homeschool year has been complete. I kept that letter. I trashed everything else. I do not keep science sheets. Now, if you are one of those moms who it is the joy of your heart to keep every single paper that ever crossed by your child's hand, then please do it. Do not let me discourage you. But for the people who are not quite on that level, I throw everything away. I throw it. I think we kept like two things, like little science worksheets, like you made a little booklet about bees or dolphins or something. I think we kept one of those for like 3 years until it disintegrated, but it all goes. When the math book is done, it's trash. And I know people that like let their kids have a bonfire in the backyard. We just put it in the trash, but I kept none of that. I mean, 22 years of homeschooling, 4 kids, like I do not have the bandwidth or the interest. And when it's done, it's done.
So I had the fear of people saying I did not school my kids, and I wanted to prove to them that I did. So my thought was I kept like their semester, unit test. I might keep a copy of that to show in math their progression. The book then would go into the latest. I had a shipping box, whatever. So whatever box just came in at the end of the school year, I would put everybody's schoolwork into that box, put their names on it, the school year, tape it up, stick it out in the shed. And then if it sat there for a year or so and I did not have to prove that they had successfully finished third grade and got to fourth grade, because now I'm stopping fourth grade, I could get rid of that box. So I did get rid of it, but I kept it for that 1 year or sometimes more than 1 year. But I have kids that have gone to college, and we did find a box recently. My kids are like, you still have this? And I'm like, oh, that I missed that one. It's successfully, you can throw that one away. We don't even have to open it up. We don't, yeah. So, but I would put workbooks, everything into it. We have in my state where we have to go and turn something in to show that they had done successfully. I would take that in for that meeting, show it to them, bring it home, stick it in the box. So,
Yeah.
but I also had the fear again. I had that, 1990s fear of you're doing what?
That's what I was just gonna say. So I was homeschooled 1 year in the 90s, and I remember my mom being very like panicky, like somebody's going to show up at our door and we're going to have to prove this. And so I still have a little bit of that lingering, even though, that was my only homeschool year. And even though I've been homeschooling my kids now for over a decade. And so what I do is I shove it all in a padded mailer envelope, like a big one. And I write the child's name on it in the year. And then I put it in a filing cabinet. So technically, I still have all my records. Have I ever had to prove anything? No. My kids have to take standardized tests every other year for our state. So clearly that proves they're learning. Obviously, when they go off to college, that will prove that they learned something. But it's kind of that whole like, okay, well, if I need to, I've got it here. So yeah, I would definitely look at, obviously, some states. I know, Jen, you've lived in much higher, like, submittal states than I have, where you've had to keep those records. But I love what you said, where you kept the paper confirming they received everything, and then you can get rid of it. So kind of look at your personality and see what's overwhelming you. I mean, if it's overwhelming, I definitely do not have random papers shoved in various places. They're all together and labeled in one spot. But yeah, you probably like your tax returns, right? You don't have to keep your taxes for the last 20 years. So look at what's going on and see if you can get rid of some stuff. Let's talk about the books, though, the book organization, because those you may want to keep even if you are done with the program, right? One of the best things about Sonlight is having that beautiful home library. But what are some ways to keep your books organized, keep them from getting lost between children if you are going to use them again, or keep them from overtaking your space, whatever size it is?
I never had very much space. We always lived in a small house. I homeschooled, 4 kids in some really small spaces. And so I am a huge fan, also as somebody who moved pretty frequently, of clear plastic bins with lids that click on securely. And every program went in its box. And then when we were using D or whatever, I would pull it out, fish out of the box. When we're done with those books, they go back in the box, and then they got put away for the next kid, because I lived in fear of pulling it out for the next kid and having 7 books missing because my children had taken them. So I protected those, like those were not for touching. You did not go into mama's box. If you wanted your own copy of Sign of the Beaver, I will go buy you one, but you may not have mine. And so, the price of that system was that we ended up with like 5 copies of Homer Price, but that's fine because the one in the box was still there when I wanted it. Also, they're mouse proof, they're waterproof, they take up almost no space. And, like you talked about having a storage room for your homeschool things. Often I had like the corner of a bedroom and just a stack of bins, and that was as good as it got.
Yep. So I love that you point out clear, because you can see it, whether it's a storage shed, your attic, your basement, under your bed, wherever you have to have that box. And I have had all those places. You can see the books that are in it without having to open the box. And you recognize the books. The other thing is the labels that we sell that put that on the spine. And my kids would keep the books. Sometimes they would take it, but when we do room cleanups and I would see books with the spine labels, those would automatically have to come out of their room so I could go find their proper home. So even at this point, my
I-
kids are gone and I have to go back and find books for my job. I can find, oh, that has such a color, that has a green label. That's one I need. So
I had a kid who was a sticker picker, so I never got into the colored labels.
I'm sorry. Sticker pickers are not fun.
Yeah.
Well,
And
I mean,
I have heard of some people putting the clear, like the library, like really heavy duty sticker over their colored stickers to prevent that. And yeah, I always keep an extra sheet of the colored labels because I'm a huge fan of those. I just love how they look so nice on the shelf and all of that. But like you said, it does make it a lot easier to find those books when they do walk away. I'm a pretty big stickler about, okay, you can read that in your room, but when you're done with it, it needs to come back to the shelf. And yes, I started using the clear boxes. We are actually traveling in our RV right now. And so I had to move a lot of my books into storage. And that's when I started using those. But before that, I really like the IKEA tall to the ceiling bookshelves because you can hold so much in those. So whether it is a corner of a bedroom or a living room, I mean, we have from preschool all the way up to level 200 on 2 of those IKEA bookshelves just built to the ceiling. So they do hold quite a bit. So if you want your books out so that, you know, kids can come back and reread them, if you like looking at them, that's one of my favorite things. I just love looking at library shelves. You know, you can do that too in a relatively small space. But I do have rules on you cannot walk away and take your books to your room and then leave them there. Because we did lose a book one time in a move that had been left in the bedroom and not put back with the other books. And then I was having to replace that one. So you may or may not want to do that. One more question that I wanted to drop in there that we hear oftentimes is when you've got multiple kids and multiple problems.
Yes, you do have multiple problems with multiple kids. That's the truth.
Multiple kids and multiple programs, excuse me. How do you decide what you're going to read first, or how do you organize your day so that you're not spending 10 hours a day? Jen, we lightly touched on it earlier with, you know, doing kind of that group reading, but how do you figure out, you know, I've got 3 kids in 3 different levels because they're all spaced out by 10, 12 years. What am I reading first? What am I doing? How do I organize my day to make sure that I'm still giving everyone what they need?
Think of it as like
I think the answer is similar to you like, how do I keep my books? And you keep yours on an open shelf, and Jonna keeps hers in the shed, and I keep mine in plastic bins. You have to figure out what works for your people. And then you have to realize that as soon as you get in a groove of anything, your children will have grown enough so that they kind of change the rules on you. I have 2 that are night owls. So getting them up first thing in the morning to do school was never going to be productive. But I had 2 other kids who wanted to work in the morning and get it over with. So I started with one of those and, you know, then kind of worked my way kid to kid to kid to kid. And, you know, so some of them, like I could run through the whole, with my youngest, I could run through his whole day. And he was like, and now am I done? Can I go? Yes, go. You know, where my oldest was more, she was the oldest. So of course she was more independent when I had more kids to homeschool. And so I just could check in with her and she just kind of ran her own thing. And I just checked in point to point over the day. Then my night owls got revved up. And so I could read with this one and that one. And once they know what to expect, they're like, I'm going to get up and I'm going to eat and then mom's going to come for me. Like you really do get into a routine. You know, like you said, multiple kids, multiple problems. It was not unusual. If you're going to do 3 programs or more than that, it was not unusual for me to be 10 o'clock at night and somebody bringing their stuff, you know, into my room. Mom, can you help me with this? Like, do you see me getting ready for bed? Yeah, but I just need to fill out this map. Can you help me?
because that's when they got to it.
Yes, because they're the night owls. And so now they're like, oh, well, you know, I'm awake. There's nothing going on. I will go back to doing this. And so sometimes if you're going to run multiple programs, it is going to take a lot of hours out of your day all the time.
I was gonna say, when you're a homeschool mom,
it's so worth it, but yeah.
When you're a homeschool mom, it's your full-time job.
Yes.
Yeah. So yeah. And some of us work and homeschool, and it's working an 80, 90 hour a week. Right, Sunny?
Yes. So I will say it's 80 or 90 though. I joke that I work 2.5 jobs. I have my real job, I have homeschooling, and then I have my mom just all the time, right? Moms are never off really. And so,
Right.
yes, I always say I have 2.5 jobs, but that is something, if you are working, I love to talk about that. That's one of my favorite things, because a lot of people don't realize they can do both. But I only spend maybe 2 to 3 hours a day on school with both kids. Now, does that mean that we've done everything on the ING? Probably not. Does that mean that I've worked with both kids in that day? Probably not. My older child being in a high school program, I'm only meeting with her like every other day now because she is so independent. And my younger child, I'm meeting with him 5 or 6 days a week to get everything done. It kind of depends. But remember, you can think outside the box. School does not just happen, 9 to 5, Monday through
Right.
Friday. And so remember that. I love, Jen, what you said, working with the personality about, daytime people versus nighttime people. We are night owls, so we do school at night on weekdays. That's just something that works better for all of us. I was wrapping up school with my 4th grader at 9 p.m. last night. And so that's just something that we do. We let our kids sleep in as a result, because my husband and I are working during the day. So that's the schedule that has worked for us, to let them sleep later, let them stay up later, let them kind of manage their own time. But if you have morning people that are falling apart by 1 p.m., you're going to want to do it in the morning and work with them to see what's going to work best. But yeah, do not feel like you have to do everything for every child every day and be done by a certain time, because that's not realistic for most people, I don't think. And if you aren't working, take advantage of the fact that you might have 10 hours a day that you can spend going back and forth between kids. Johnny, you looked like you were about to say something.
We were talking, when you're looking at, for those of us who like to have that sense of accomplishment on our day, and you have multiple kids, your youngest ones have the least amount to get done. And so actually tackling them first takes that, like, all of a sudden when the youngest one's done, 1/4 of your schooling is done. And then the next one, it's not even lunch and I'm already halfway done with my day. Halfway done. But it's kind of like that snowball debt, where you work on the smallest one first, because at the end of the day, you're still working on the one who is usually your high schooler, but they have so much they can do on your own, just like you were saying, and you're just catching up with them. And even if they're upper middle school and you have to read with them, they still could have done their writing, their language arts, their math, and their science on their own. You then can enjoy a read aloud with them and catching up with what you have to do. So.
Well, and I read a long time ago, I was reading, I forget what homeschool book it was in, but she said, deal with your toddlers first, because toddlers do not take to being ignored. They will make you pay. And I mean, that my experience bears that out. So if you start with the little ones, then they feel like, well, mom did school with me. Now I'm going to go whatever. And you're like, okay, whew. So, and I know it sounds crazy, this like, work a little bit here and flex the schedule there and only do these and don't worry about that. I know it sounds crazy, especially to new homeschool moms who have this like very like ambitious vision of what it's supposed to look like. I loved homeschooling, loved it, wouldn't trade it for $1 million. It never looked like what I thought it was going to look like at the beginning. But like Jonna and I both have adult children that we homeschooled all the way through who are successfully like working and married and parents, and they are fully functional adults. So I promise you, like you can flex it and it's okay.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know I look at you too and some of our other mentors with successful adult children, and I'm like, okay, it works, right? I was telling somebody earlier today that, I think I'm on the right track. But then when I see other homeschool families who have made it, and finished the journey, that is very reassuring that, yes, it does work out. And I know, if you are starting out, it seems like a lot, it seems intimidating, but I have seen the fruits already in my kids just from where they were when we first started. So yeah, you're on the right track. If you love those kids and are trying to do what's best for them, you will be able to. And that's something that sometimes we lose sight of when we have, all these plans and ideas, or we think we can't do it. I agree. Give the child that needs you most right now, give them that attention, because oftentimes then it's much easier, like what you were saying with toddlers, Jen, to move on to the next child, who maybe wasn't as needy right now. And for us, with both of my kids, that's always kind of been that kindergarten to third grade stage where they can't do a ton independently, but as they get a little bit older, it does get easier as they're able to do more of their own assignments, writing and math and handwriting and all those extra things as they get a little older. So if you're in a phase where it feels hard because you've got a lot of littles there, it does get easier as they get older. So before we wrap up, do you ladies have any parting words of wisdom to share?
Just trust the process. Just do the next thing. Don't worry about what's going to happen in 3 weeks or in 2 weeks. You just worry about today, knowing that when you get done with today, there's going to be tomorrow and you're going to do the next thing and it's going to be okay. I promise you.
I love Sonlight because it was made to be flexed, because it doesn't look the same in any two homes, in any two families, and that is completely okay. It is so very full that it is more than enough. And so if you don't read every book, it's okay. It's still more than enough. And if you don't do every writing assignment, it's okay. And, you make it work for you, and for your family and for your kids. And it's made to do that. So if it looks different in your house than in somebody else's, that is completely fine.
And it's supposed to, right? Everybody's going to do it differently and it still is going to work for you. We obviously have talked about different ways we've done it, but if you polled 100 Sonlighters, they're probably all doing it 100 different ways. So absolutely agree. Thank you both for being here and offering so much encouragement, so many ideas. If you are joining us for the first time, we do these monthly helps and hacks the third Thursday of every month. So you can join us, ask your questions in the chat, follow up in the app with us after if you have additional questions or anything like that. Make sure that you're plugged into the Sonlight Connections community, because all three of us are in that app with you, as well as other Sonlight mentors as well. And we would love to offer encouragement, help you troubleshoot things, and pray for you as well. So make sure you're joining us in those places, and we will see you next time.
Bye.